Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all today. Welcome to the room. It is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. The morning session. Happy hump day, everyone. Post-election. And we got a clear winner late, I guess last night or early in the wee hours. And that was best case scenario, as we talked about. Best case scenario for these markets to get moving and going and not linger on. Got President-elect Trump now on board here, and the markets responded, and it looks like perhaps the markets responded yesterday ahead of time, and a massive two-day move, huge high range days. We talked Monday that today's ES range on Wednesday for the Wednesday bar could be about 150 plus points of range, a massive range day if Trump were to be elected. And we got that almost 150 points before the RTH open here, 139.5 point range. That's a massive range for the ES, 213% of ADR. 213% of ADR for the ES. Since that initial range was developed, though, which was around 2 in the morning here, we have not seen a new high yet. Instead, it's been mostly range bound, holding the gains here into the RTH open and heading into the RTH open. Per the pre-market video, the idea was any pullback into intraday VWAP could provide a bit of a cushion for an intraday buying opportunity. But a lot of the day's range is mostly in. A lot of the day's range is in. When you get this much range prior to the RTH open, what's left for the RTH trade? You can see right here, 139.25 points, 212.5% of ADR, and again, all of that by 2 a.m. It's been a massive two-day move, one of the biggest two-day moves we've seen in a long while. And really what we were pointing to on Monday right here was, do we get something like this on Wednesday? And that's where we mentioned about a 150 point day. That day right there was 155.5 points. And you can see that's today is the biggest day since then. This is the 140 points or close to it. Very similar style day here. I imagine at some point here we may turn green as well. I initially would have liked for it to drop first and then show some massive range. This just kind of took off and raced to a new all-time high straight away. But that was the idea, was do we get something that looks like this? Super high range day, 150 point range, and we still may get those 150 points. But again, for the most part, the majority, most of the day's range is likely in. And best case scenario for bulls is to kind of maintain these gains at 5,900. That was another thing we talked about in the pre-market video, is if we pull back toward 5,900, bulls want to keep it bid. And here's a little bit of a pullback right there, right to 5,900, right to VWAP. And we've seen a 35 point bounce off that level. I know it doesn't look that big, but it is a big bounce off that level. 5,900, 5,935, about 34 point move right there really quickly. We still may get a little bit more as well, but a massive response. Now, one of the things we mentioned also was that the YM could perhaps give us the best response of any of the markets, and it certainly has. The YM has a range today of 1,365 points. It's 296% of ADR. 209, that might as well call it 300%. 3 times average daily range right now. That is tremendous in size. It's the biggest day of the year by way of raw number of points. The only other day that was close to it here was that day right there where it got 1,200 points, and that was on that meltdown Monday. That massive meltdown Monday where we had a 2-day slide ahead of it. Then Monday this thing dropped tremendously. That was the biggest day. This right here by far eclipses that range, the biggest high range day we've seen in a long while. And you have to go back a couple of years to go get something that's even in line with this. There's 1365. You got to go back to the 2022 where you have several days at or bigger, and most of those are all pointed to the downside. These are all massive selling days for the most part. Right in here, all of these massive down days over and over. This was one low, that was the low where it turned around, and that was an up day there. So it's been over 2 years since we've seen something of that magnitude. This day right here is as big. That's 1,350 points right here, and that was November 10th. So 2 years later, we're getting something of the same size, and today's bigger. So really, it's over 2 years because you go back to October where it had a 1,500 point day. So massive day, something we thought would likely be the case, especially, and this is something we go back to in the summer, and also something we talked about to begin the year. In an election year here, if there is a change in leadership, especially to Republican from Democrat, there tends to be a rally that can happen, and you can go back to 2016 for that as well, where you had Trump initially winning over the Democratic side, change of leadership there, and there was a massive reversal. First down huge, then way up, and then the result was a continuation into the end of the year and into Q1. Similar circumstances here with a huge response. So this is a massive win here for the market to have this kind of come and go without any contested type of election that drags on for days or even weeks or months sometimes, like it has in the past. This is a big time boost to the market here to kind of get it done and over with. Massive move here for the YM. Now again, it's kind of tough here when this big move happens at a new all-time high, because now you just have to kind of go and drill higher to new highs and just keep pushing this thing. Or, you know, is there some sort of pullback that needs to happen first? You know, it's always weird when you're having to push to a new high and that gives you new juice. But as of right now, it appears as though this thing could continue to work its way higher into the end of the year off of this strength. Now, we do have Fed tomorrow, and Fed could change things a little bit here, but it could also help as well, I suppose. So big time response here, exactly what we were talking about. Over 1,000 points is what we were looking for the YM. But perhaps the biggest responder here is RTY, small cap stocks. Look at that bar. That is a 371% of ADR day. It's up 5% right now, but it is off the highs of the day. The highs of the day were set in the 4 o'clock hour, which was 5 hours ago. So it was up even more than that, 6 or even plus percent. Right now it's up 5%, a massive day. Look at the range of this day right here, 151 points, and you really have to go back super far. I don't even think there is one here that matches this. You have to go all the way back to this day right here, where you had, let's see, what day is that? That's exactly 1, 2, 3 years ago. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago. You got that day right there, which is, I'm trying to zoom in. Here, let's go right here. This day. That day right there, 4 years ago, 167 points. And that is the 20th. So this was also election day afterwards. when Biden won. So a similar massive range day here, and at the time that looks like that was busting through new highs here and then rotating higher. So that's November 9th, 2020. Huge high range day there. So the last time around was a similar election day rally here. This one right now, massive 151.9 points and 371% of ADR. So again, when you have a range of that magnitude prior to the RTH open, hard to squeak out a whole lot more range. You can get a little bit more here, but most of the day's range is in. And as of right now, the NQ is on highs. It just pushed to a new high right now. This one is up 158% of ADR and approaching all-time highs at 21,000. Only 2 other days have traded as high as where we are right now in the NQ. So if you go back right here, it's these 2 days right there that set the new all-time high, which is just shy of 21,000. Just shy. So a huge high range day here for this one, although the NQ lagging compared to ES strength, YM strength, and RTY strength. Lagging a little bit here in terms of ADR as well. This is only 158% of ADR, and it's not a historical range day for this one, as there are plenty of other days that are bigger, including just a few days ago. That day right there is about the same size. So this one could still see a little bit more range here as well, trading right at the previous month and previous week's high. But huge responses across the board. Now, one thing I find super interesting is gold finally broke down. We're finally seeing at least some significant breakdown in gold. It's in line with some of the pullbacks we've seen, where you'd have a big pullback here or here or here, and then quickly you're kind of rallying afterwards. But this is the biggest day we've seen since some of those days. 98-point day. This was about 96 or so. On that pullback day, ended up being a checkmark continuation. This one right here was a heavy 100-point day. It also bounced after that, and this was a strong top initially. So this is the biggest day we've seen since then. It's interesting that gold and the dollar went in 2 opposite directions exactly the same way. Super strong moves. Here's the dollar. So dollar up big, gold down big. Here's the dollar. Massive gap and run, and got just shy of the 105.50s. And right here on that day was basically when we called the low there on that day. That was it, with the potential to go back to 105.50 on the high end. So it has completed that move in a big way. And as you recall, this was a moment in time here where it had everything it needed to break down and drop, but because it wasn't and didn't, that's when I mentioned this is about the time we get that wild squeeze that'll happen on that low. And the squeeze played out perfectly right to 103.50. Here in the recent month, it's kind of hung around and held 103.50, and then now massive squeeze on election day or post-election day. So, open to interpretations on what this means for dollar up, gold down. I wonder if gold up so hard was a defensive play here, and now instead of defensive play, perhaps it's more of a risk-on atmosphere for the markets, risk-on, and that could lead to a bit of a pullback in gold, dollar up. Not sure here, but a super strong dollar, though, again, can tend to lead to a pullback in the market. But we've seen the dollar rally tremendously, and these markets are still at all-time highs. So something's up with the correlation there that still I can't explain too much. But this is a huge pullback here. It's a failure at the previous month's midpoint. It's at the previous quarter's high. And while big pullbacks like this have been bid back up, if it can't get back above 27.10, the mid, then we have back to the previous month's low at 26.20 that could be in play, and then you pick it up from there. So it'll be interesting to see how this thing responds here after such a high range day down. But even with all of those big days that we're talking about here, the biggest of all of them is Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's another theme that we had going into post-election days, which was crypto likely to be up big. Crypto likely to be up big, perhaps especially on a Trump victory. Crypto likely to be big in Q4 and post-election into the end of the year, and we've seen that play out big time. Bitcoin hit a new all-time high here above 76,000 and is up 6.68% right now off the highs of the day. The highs of the day were set, again in overnight trading right around midnight. It hit 76,170, and when you look at the size of this key range, massive key range, right? There were some good questions before. Dale asked some good questions regarding the key range and how to engage some of the most significant levels. This one right there is a significant level. That's your 25% extension level. That can oftentimes be a big time fade, and you can see it is the high. 170 is today's high. 190 is the actual level, but within 20 points it might as well be a bullseye. So that is a perfect test at the R25 extension, and that can oftentimes be a fade opportunity. But just to reach that level after an expansion through the key range high still points to perhaps more upside ahead to the 50% extension. That's 81,555, and then a continuation to the 100% extension, which is 92,285. 92, where are you? Way up here. 92,285. So we're still working higher toward 92,285 in Bitcoin. Another check mark month is playing out at the moment, a high range day here. And as we mentioned several days ago, if Bitcoin is up big here post-election, so will Bitcoin miners. And Bitcoin miners right now having a day of it. RIOT is up nearly 13% here, 12.77% off the highs of the day. But look at the gap up in this guy. Had a huge gap up yesterday to begin, rallied, and then gapped up and is holding at value right now, right around 11 bucks. That's an $11 price tag after rallying off the 650 level here. And by the way, that 650 level was right on the S25 of this large key range right here. So a big time move up for RIOT. Clean Spark up over 11% right now. A big gap up out of this one as well. Kind of a rounded bottom, and as soon as this thing gets above 13, you have a shot to go hit the 20 to 21 zone. So I mentioned on this pullback into 10 that it could double into 20 to 21 up ahead, and so far the bounce has already been 20% off that low, and making moves right now so far is this group. Marathon is up 10% right now, so double digits across the board. This one here gapping up as well. And then when we looked at others yesterday, like HUT 8 and CIFR, they were all up. MicroStrategy, this one has led to the upside in a big way. It took a gap up and filled. This one's been weird against Bitcoin lately, just because it's been so high beta and just kind of really directionally moving by itself. But it's up 8%. It had gapped up even more than that. But you can see this entire space just doing tremendously well. So some of the themes of which we talked about before are really playing out. You also see, on Trump's victory here, Elon Musk getting rewarded here up 13% and hit the key range target today. So you had this key range right here and hit the 50%, fell back toward the middle, gapped up on earnings, held the edge here, and then bang, you hit the 280, what is that, 288, 287 target there. What's that level? 287.36. So got the 287.36. That's one of the highest prices we've seen in a long while for Tesla since last year. You can see right here, last year we had this one rallying from 160 up to 280, and then it got a little higher here, nearly to 300, gap down below 280. We had it going back to 220 here, and you know, back and forth, but this is the highest we've seen since then. There's 290 right there, and that fills the gap basically. So this one being rewarded on this election day victory for Trump, as Elon was a big advocate for Trump this go round. Big interview again, as I mentioned, with Joe Rogan just prior to, which I still haven't seen, but I got snippets of it. He was advocating tremendously for Trump there, and just a big time boon over the last couple of weeks out of that podcast alone. This thing gapping up tremendously here on that. So just big time moves across the board. One of the ones we liked heading into today from yesterday's perspective was NXPI. Really liked the way that this thing put in a strong low yesterday. So this was yesterday afternoon. We had NXPI as a short-term swing candidate, but also as kind of a medium and long-term candidate. The short-term swing was for this price to come back to 236, which would fill the gap and would hit the developing key range midpoint. That's an impulsive move down, strong low. That strong low happens right off the 220 level, and the 220 level has been heavily bid this year, and each time it is rotated off the 220 level, it's given us a green G squat bar here and here and there, and then this one was a little bit higher right there, but off the 220. And that's important. That's important because that's showing you that turnaround off that level has some big time juice behind it. It has range, it has volume, and you see the coloration on the chart. And that was the purpose when we created this paint bar indicator for our Masters members, was big time reversals, big time moves will have different color to them now. And this was the kind of the epitome of that. You get one of those bars at significant support, it's going to mean more than just any other bar that you might see down there. And after a significant impulsive sell-off, you have a high probability target back at the middle of that range. So from yesterday's close to today's open, already up, it rallied as high as 232. Yesterday's close was in the 224s, so a big time push to the upside already. Any pullback could still be a buy for a squeeze into 236, and we could be looking at a follow through to 256 on a medium term basis, and then 296 on a long term basis. So depending on what duration you'd like to play this, or all durations, there's a target for everybody out of this opportunity. So from the low, that's your short-term swing. This is kind of your medium-term move back to the key range high at 56. And then long-term, can we get it all the way to 296 and the previous quarter's high? May not be right away, but that's why it's a longer-term target. So this one up today, 2.7%, and doing quite well right now. Big-time move there. You're also seeing some strength out of the space group here. Here's Rocket Lab. We had this one as a buy candidate on this pullback day here late last week. That was on a Thursday, and mentioned that this pullback could lead to a push through the $12 level and perhaps midway into the next market structure above, which is 14 bucks. 14 bucks is the midpoint to the next level up. Next level up is 16. So on this pullback, it could be a bounce into about 14. You pull back to about 12 and work your way to 16, something like that. So it's done really well here today, getting a high of 1273. Nice continuation, new highs, and maintains a really good market structure to the upside. SMR, nuclear, doing well today on a pullback as well. We wondered out loud, if that strong intraday low was going to be a buy opportunity. That was a really good strong intraday low for all of nuclear that day, and so far working its way higher. Today up 6%, holding right at $20. We'll see if that opens up more upside there. Oklo up as well. Strong low a couple of days ago on a Monday. Similar low to SMR. Right now, 2 days holding the midpoint. Nice key range here as well in play. And great new key range to work with out of that one. NNE looks similar, 285, 2.85% higher. Not quite the strong low Monday. This one looks a little bit different here, but still trending up, but a little bit more modestly so against the others. Lightbridge kind of marginally higher right now, but this one did have a strong low on Monday and a super large key range out of this one here. So a ton of movement across the board for a lot of these markets. Double-digit wins out of Bitcoin miners. Marathon now up 11%. CleanSpark up 13.5%. RIOT up 14%. And Bitcoin now over 7% higher. 7% higher at 75,000. And Ethereum up 9.5% right now. And last night mentioned that Dogecoin was another big winner there. Dogecoin up, it was like 24% yesterday on that move. Right now it's off the highs here. It was at about 21 bucks yesterday, or 21 cents rather. Man, if that thing goes to 21 bucks, instant millionaires. But it was at 21 cents yesterday. Right now trading about 19.2. That's a big move out of those. So big time strength across the board for the most part, unless your name is gold. Gold down, all metals as a matter of fact. Copper's down near 4 2/3% right now, down big for copper. Silver's down 4% as well. As you see, silver with a big down bar as well, and then platinum is down 1.59%. So and that's probably something I should have forecasted ahead of time. So probably should have had that. If equities were going to rally big, that would suggest risk on. Crypto is going to rally big, risk on. Then metals and gold, risk off. And those go down. So buying of one side to sell the other. And you can see the relationships kind of playing out here today. So big time movement across the board, and one that just can't catch a break. SMCI down 26% right now and is trading just above 20 bucks. $20.49 right now. This one had earnings yesterday, and I'll be honest, I have no clue what happened on the earnings call or anything that happened with regards to earnings, as it was all kind of I had basketball games last night. Last night was a late night. My daughter didn't get back to the school till after 10 p.m. Late basketball games at Westlake High School. If you're not familiar with Westlake High School, it is the richest high school in Austin, in Texas, and one of the top in the nation. Like, their zip code per capita makes more money than even like California and other places. So Westlake High School, that's where Drew Brees went to high school. Sam Ellinger went to high school there. A lot of baseball players. It's a big deal. So our basketball teams got smoked last night. But my daughter's JV team did considerably better than the varsity or the freshman team, that's for sure. Man, those girls were slinging threes. It was incredible to watch last night. But man, we were on the losing end of that one. SMCI. So I didn't get much of what happened out of the earnings report here. But it looks like here Goldman Sachs this morning at 9 a.m. adjusted their price target to $28 from $67.50. $67.50 is about right there. And when they did that, price was already sitting at 20. So I guess they think there's some upside up ahead. Barclays adjust at 9 a.m. as well to 25 from 42. Loop Capital adjusts the target to 35 from 100 and maintains a buy rating. That's bold. So you're seeing a lot of downward adjusted forecasts here for the price as this thing just continues to get crapped on. Just a tremendous meltdown of epic proportions, I would say unlike anything we've seen in a very long time, like historical proportions. And it's basically gone into our disaster scenario, which is this range right here. At 35, it needed to hold 35. If it didn't hold 35, it would go all the way to 20 against this previous market structure, and that's exactly what it's done on this huge meltdown. So it's back to 20 now. It needs to hold 20 to get back up. If it fails at 20, now you're getting cut in half again to $10. So this is a big time alarm bells here for SMCI. If it can't hold 20, it gets cut in half again to $10. But if it can hold 20, there's a fast double that might happen just on a ricochet bounce. You know, it's been able to have 10-point bounces here, even as early as last month. Here's 40, and here's 50. It did a 10-point bounce in a week. This would be 20 here, but I don't know if it gets that anytime soon. Again, it's hands off until proven otherwise here. But at some point, maybe it's too cheap not to dip the toe as a lottery ticket now that could pay off pretty big in Q1 of next year. I think some folks have been asking AI when SMCI stock might bounce, and AI keeps saying Q1 of 25. So that's a great point right there. You'd like to see the Ernst & Young price forecast. They probably say 0 or negative. Got a O, folks. If you ask Wedbush, they're saying delisted. So this is, yeah, again, not good. Not good. Yeah, good question here. I just saw this back here by Jake. I hadn't covered crude oil just yet. Crude off the lows in a big way. This is a massive rally right now off the $70 level. This is turning into a tremendous intraday reversal of pretty significant proportions here. And I'll go to your question here in a moment. There was an initial reaction happening at 70, but to see it rally the way it has, this thing was down 3% earlier. It's now gone positive and up 0.8% right now. That's a massive reversal. It's 145% of ADR on the range, so almost 50% bigger than average. It's the highest range bar we've seen since early October, when you had a couple of these big days here. It's a huge wipeout day where it took out yesterday's low and took out Monday's low, and then turned around and is now nearly engulfing both the 2-day range there. That can tend to be a massive indication of a forthcoming rally to come. Especially if it can maintain these gains, or better yet, close above yesterday's high. That would be massive. This is a huge, huge turnaround right now, unlike anything you tend to see. The last time we saw something like this was probably this day back here. That was the first trading day of October. Dropped heavily to the downside, took out 3-day lows, turned around and pushed through the previous high. It was just a massive range day of over 5 points. You don't see a 5-point day very often. As a matter of fact, we had to go back years to find the other 5-point day, and we got 2 in like the span of 6 or 7 days. That was also a 5-point day, 5-point day. So today to have 2.86 points, that's pretty good. We might finish the day over 3. It's very close to going outside day up. It needs a little bit more to get to that previous session's high, but it's within reach here. Previous session's high, 72.67. So this is a massive turnaround, reversal, intraday V-bottom reversal, unlike what we've seen in a while out of that commodity. Here you can see what it looked like on the hourly time frame. There's $70. It had a little bit of almost a perfect double bottom. It ended up being a minor higher low, and then launched off 70 and rallied back toward 72.40, which is the key level we talked about yesterday for a failure. Massive turnaround, massive V reversal. You just don't see that very often. And it's given life to crude right now in a period of seasonality that is bearish. And the way it looks, it wouldn't surprise me if we get another 3.5 point rally, say back to 76s up ahead, if it can maintain these gains. So that's an impressive turnaround right now. You look at the intraday chart of crude oil here, and this is what the low looked like. So a little bit earlier you asked a good question, and I mentioned it's pausing right now at $70, and that's where it had just developed this higher low, and it was sitting, right about here. It was right at the RTH open basically for crude, and then it just gunned it to the upside, and here's your previous day's high. So just a massive, massive mover. And to your question here, and for the purposes of the recording, Jake asks here, in CL, directional bias was bearish because we opened below PVA and EA low, yesterday low, and at what point does the directional bias flip bullish? Like, is it still bearish until price breaks above the PVAH, or does directional bias not change no matter what? So that's a great question, and directional bias can change in a couple of ways. Number one, VWAP can be an early indication of a directional bias move where bias is changing. So if VWAP is trending down, then most of the time it's going to be taken offered when it's tested. It's defended, but then right here it started to be defended, and then it was taken bid. So a change at VWAP can oftentimes be an indication of intraday directional bias being changed. Of course, right there at 70, you also had some great S3 reversals, and you had great S3 reversal signals over the past few hours. But where I would say is the biggest indicator of directional bias change, Jake, is the previous session's midpoint. The previous session's midpoint, it tends to be where huge directional bias takes over. In this case, it was kind of weird because price had dropped so far down that directional bias changed much earlier. So if you look right here, previous session's mid is this level right there, and that's also where it closed yesterday. So if you look right here, the close price is that black dotted line, and the previous day's midpoint is also underneath that black dotted line. That's the purple or pink. So that is where the true directional bias would change, would be at the previous session's midpoint. And so that's why, and I know you're asking questions also based off of the book as well, and that's why you have the pivot range relationships, right? The pivot range, lower value, higher value relationships. In a lower value relationship, the top of the pivot range is your midpoint. In a higher value relationship, the bottom of the pivot range is your midpoint. So when you're trending up, the midpoint is going to be the bottom of the pivot range. That's where you want to stay above, or the directional bias changes. And so that's where you have this gold relationship right here, where even though we pull back right here, as long as it stays above the previous month's mid, everything is still bullish. And then it pulled back here, and here we break the mid. That's a massive change in break in that trend. It's a massive directional bias change as well, because it's the midpoint. Same thing for intraday charts. And now ETH or RTH mid, when I'm using futures, I tend to go ETH on futures. So I have, you can see right now, this has the overnight chart, so I tend to use the ETH. But I would say that either one is quote unquote right, depending on what you're looking at. Just kind of focus on that one. If you're RTH only, then you're using the RTH mid. If you're ETH, you know, kind of stick with one or the other. Don't try to look at both and muddy up the waters. But usually when I'm using futures lately being the last kind of decade and a half, you know, it's been ETH. Now if you go back 20 years to 2004, when I was trading at Nirvana, the ETH didn't have as much volume and fluidity as it does now. There wasn't much volume at all, wasn't much movement at all, so traders would tend to focus on RTH charts. But over the years, you've gotten much more of a global kind of marketplace here, where you're seeing movement at all hours from 8 p.m. at night with China coming online, and then you have, or the Asian markets in general, then you have the 2 a.m. London Open. It just provides much more volume and fluidity to the charts, and so ETH tends to work quite well, especially for the futures, which trade almost 24 hours a day. But that midpoint is important. Now in this scenario, this is a different weird scenario, because it dropped so much initially, and then it rallied all the way up here, and clearly it's already been bullish, but the midpoint is here. And you can see how it stalled at the mid for a moment and then took the mid bid right there. Yesterday's range was tiny anyways, it was just this. So from an intraday perspective, the bias changed at VWAP first in a big way, and then it really changed upon crossing the previous session's midpoint. So kind of some long-winded thoughts right there, and thank you for the questions. Keep them coming if you got them. But today, just a tremendous rally in crude oil compared to what you would normally see. Huge low failure, and then you kind of got a double bottom here on 70. Beautiful max reversal signals right here off of the PivotBoss bands, and a rally that takes you almost outside day, but took out 2-day lows first. So just tremendous activity right now out of crude oil. Bitcoin still up big here. Marathon up 12 now. Clean Spark up 13.8. RIOT up 15%. NXPI is gaining steam as well. This one is up 3.5%. This was our best swing opportunity heading into today based off of yesterday's rejection at support. So a really good one-day mover so far. Of course, on a Trump victory, we were looking for equities to rally big. We were looking for crypto to rally big. We were looking for Bitcoin miners to rally big. Those were all going to be immediate movers. Another thing we looked at with regards to a Trump victory is oil and gas related stocks. Oil drillers especially could be in play, and oil drilling companies hadn't quite looked at the drillers just yet, but while they might pop on the anticipation of opening up some drilling and things of that nature, I think JP mentioned a little bit earlier that it might take some time. You know, it takes a little while just to get those permits through, to get some to get those drillers online, but they may pop in general just on the anticipation. And here's PTEN. This is one of the ones we looked at a few days ago when we looked through the oil drillers list. This one up today 9.95%, call it 10% right now on a gap. Mentioned this one could be a great opportunity because it had been beaten down this year and it is so cheap. When we looked at it, it was around $7.50 a few days ago, and now it's trading $8.50. Hit $8.50 here today, and just to get back to VWAP and VPOC here would take you back to $10. That's a 33% rally from the recent lows just a couple of days ago. So P10 right now showing an initial pop on the potential here, and even I'm not sure how much of the coverage you saw last night, but the this morning catching up on kind of his Trump's acceptance speech, I guess, if you will. And one of the things he mentioned was working with RFK Jr. or RFK, and said, "Hey man, you got a great agenda. Just leave oil and gas to me. You know, leave oil alone, because we're going to do a lot of drilling. We're going to be all into oil. We've got more oil than any other country, including Saudi Arabia, Russia." That was part of his thing, so he reiterated that. That's something I mentioned late last week. He was really pushing, in especially the Joe Rogan interview, was oil. Oil is back with regards to drilling and getting more oil out of U.S. ground. So drillers up, P10 here. Let's see, Noble's another one right here. This one's taking a move higher. This one's up 7.66% right now. That's a big pop off the lows. And again, oil drillers have been crushed all year. This is a huge boon. This could be day one breakouts, day one transition days in the oil drilling group. Another one is Neighbors in BR. NBR up 7.5% here today as well. You can see right here a big gap up. For this one, This one hadn't been beat down as much as the others, but hasn't had a year to remember thus far. It is up off the lows of 60 bucks here, double bottom off 60 and now trading 85. Not as impressive of a day as the others, but still up 7.5% as of right now. HP, Helmerich and Payne. Let's see, this one's up 7% right now, taking a gap up as well. And C Drill Limited was another one we looked at a couple of days ago. This one taking a gap and running here at 42 bucks right now. So a lot of good ones here moving. But perhaps my favorite of the bunch was PTEN a couple of days ago because it was a favorable price. It has been crushed all year long, and if there was a Trump victory again, these could be seen as heating back up a bit. But it could take some time for these to fully mature. But just to get back to VPOC up above would be a pretty decent medium-term play. So this is huge right here with how things could play out moving forward for just the drillers in general. I have not looked at some of the big oil stocks here. Let's see, Chevron is up with a gap up 2.8%. You got Exxon here. Exxon up also about 1.5%, taking a gap up. So just marginally higher here, but higher nonetheless, which kind of supports our initial thesis there. Now, the flip side of that was going to be EV type of stocks or clean energy stocks. Those might take a hit on a Trump victory, or more specifically, I guess, a Harris loss. First Solar, let's see, this one's down 12%. Case in point, down 12% for First Solar here. That's a big move. We got, what is this, Solar Edge? Solar Edge down 20% and has earnings after the bell today. This one's down 20%, so solar stocks down in a big way right now. This is just off the top of my head. Let's see, Jinko Solar, JKS, down 13% today. Again on a Trump victory, Harris loss. There's Canadian Solar, but I'm forgetting the name right now, or the ticker. So again, solar is not my favorite group at all. You know, I have a grudge against this group. It only tends to pop if government money's coming into those companies. Any pop tends to be short-lived. It's been down, down, down. So solar is just not my favorite at all. But stocks like this, those clean energy stocks, could be down quite a bit, and so far proving our initial thoughts on solar. Let's see. Trying to find a couple of more. Sunrun is another one here. Yikes, 27% down today on Sunrun. Earnings tomorrow, and just getting destroyed here for Sunrun. Oof. I think we were right on top of it with some of our initial thoughts. ENPH down 19% for ENPH. This one had been trending down too. MAXN is Maxion Solar. Yikes! That's not right. Is this... Oh, that's a reverse split. I was about to say. A reverse split. Minus 99%, whatever that means. This one is barely hanging out of the gutter there. But yeah, you can definitely tell again, solar is just getting kicked in the teeth. And one I haven't looked at with you all here is DJT. This one was up pretty big overnight. It got up to about 55 right around midnight. 55 is here, but 55 is hard resistance right now for this stock. So it got as high as 55 overnight, and then here this morning got up to 45. In doing so, it filled our key range. So we now have ourselves a key range here in play. You have a strong high right here. You have a strong low here, and here is the midpoint at 41.78. We got it filled today, so we have ourselves a new key range. And that key range doesn't look particularly big, but it's a pretty big key range. It's almost a 100% key range, which means if you go from the impulse low to the impulse high, you nearly double. You would double at about 59, and the impulse high is about 55. So it's like a 90-85% key range. It's huge. Which means if it went to the 100% downside target, it's $3. That's how big it is. And if you go to the 100% upside target, you're pushing all the way to $80. I don't know if we get to 80. But we could certainly get 55 again. And that could be a great target down the road for this one, just as a pure momentum play. You know, again, if you get your pullback into 25 to 27.5, you're doubling right back to this level. Again, this one, a lot of volatility. A lot of crazy action. You would think that this move right here was designed either in anticipation of a Trump victory or to make it look like it was a Trump victory. There was speculation that there was a billionaire pumping tons of money into this stock to pump it up, and that billionaire was theorized to be Elon Musk, and so, or speculated to be Elon Musk. However, it happened. Again, we knew this was kind of a meme stock type of price action in both directions. So if you do play something like this, you know, just got to know, mind your risk here. But if you get into the 27.5 level on this pullback, 27.5 to 55 is a double. And you can play that momentum move on a Trump victory here. So tremendous movement here across the board, and we were right on top of a lot of the relationships that could happen. Credit to Dwayne as well. Dwayne asked a question a couple of weeks ago, you know, post-election, you know, which stocks or groups would move based off of, you know, certain candidates winning, and we kind of went over some of those scenarios. And so far, they've played out right in line with what we're talking about here, at least of the ones we've talked about. And I'm sure there's other relationships we didn't cover just yet that we'll start to see, but tremendous movement so far out of these stocks. And one I didn't even mention right now, I should have, is Coinbase on Bitcoin and crypto strength. This one gaps up tremendously and is up 21% right now. 21%. This is something I've mentioned a long while ago, which is once Bitcoin and crypto start to rally again, this thing will skyrocket. We've had this one as a double candidate this year alone. This year we mentioned if it hit 115 in January. First week of January we said if it hits 115 it will double to 230. And it did that in about 6 weeks. And that's on top of when we mentioned before, if it hits 40, we get to 80. If it hits, this level here, we double again. So this one gave us multiple doubles last year. The last one we talked about to begin the year was 115. I hadn't really mentioned it much lately, but it did hit a 100% key range target. Here's this impulse high, impulse low. Look at the 100% target right there. Key range for the win. Tremendous key range move right there, down to that 100% target. I'm sure we have a new key range that we can mark up now, but this one was tremendous. You can see the traps and reversals here. Up at the high, you can see the reaction there. The moves here, that was a reaction there, eventually got you down. And now massive gap up, well through the 220 level, well through VWAP in the 200-day. This could be huge. Now from this low on Monday to this high, that's a massive 3-day move. Can we get back to the midpoint of that range and get us a new key range off of this impulse move? I don't know if we do, this thing might be done and going, but Coinbase is another one to keep on the list here for big time movers. Just a tremendous mover right now out of that one. And Palantir was one that was huge yesterday on a big gap and run. Today, gapping up again. A good point yesterday regarding this stock by JP, that this one is would likely rally here if the red team wins, as this one is donated more to Republican campaigns. This one does a lot of work, especially with our various government agencies, 3-letter agencies, the AI work, the defense contractors, all that. So this one rallies likely on that one. And the initial idea yesterday was to gap to 49 and push through it would suggest a continuation to 56 on a near-term basis. Just a swing near-term basis. We're almost there today. 54.23 on a high. Right now trading 53. 56 is here. Even if we pull back to 49, you likely take the next step to 63 as your next upside target. This one's moving in 7-point increments and continues to power even higher still. Big time strength. Now, one I didn't mention that goes alongside Coinbase is Hood. Hood has had a tremendous move. It's doubled since August 5th, which was the market meltdown Monday. It hit 14 that day and hit 28 last week. Big impulse sell-off back down and got a new key range at these highs. This key range is about 5.5 points. So you're looking at about 34 as the next upside target for this one. This one also rallies on crypto strength as well. And so again, with Bitcoin up 7, Ethereum up 9, miners up big time, this one we'll see some tailwinds behind it as well. And we're seeing that kind of play out very, very nicely as of right now. Nucor. Let's talk Nucor real quickly. Nucor's up big at the moment, 16%. This likely clearly on a Trump victory as well. Nucor is, here's the business summary. Nucor is a leading producer of structural steel. Steel bars, steel joist, steel deck, and cold finish bars in the United States. It also produces direct reduced iron that is used in its steel mills. And that could be an indication of Republican victory, time to build, time to get to work with that, and more, less red tape, more ability to kind of build things, and that type of thing. And you see a massive gap and move right there. So big time gap up out of Nucor, up 23 points, 16%, 249% of ADR, and a massive move right now back to value by way of the 200-day and VWAP for the year, and is now sitting at the previous quarter's high. So this is an indication of strength behind that victory as well. So just a ton of movers in both directions. RIOT now up 18%. 18% for RIOT, and nearly a double off the lows. This thing's working on a double here from the lows. From about 640, you need to get to about 1280 to double here. We're at 1147 right now. Massive gap and run. 18% higher out of RIOT. CIFR, another Bitcoin miner, is up 24.5%. This is one we talked about recently. We actually had it right here on that day when it popped up on the scans as a high range G squat day, and mentioned how that was a perfect box reversal at the time. 325, got this little box right here, transition day, that would open things up back toward 575. And look at that move so far. It's now through it and into the 660 level. That's huge right there. So a massive, massive continuation to the upside for this one as well. Yeah, what's the connection with crypto and a Trump win? I think it was seen that Trump was more sympathetic to crypto than perhaps a Harris campaign. I'm not sure the exact reasons there, but more sympathetic to it. And I think that's what folks were betting on, was especially with his connection to some coins. But yeah, he was more sympathetic to crypto in general, comparatively speaking. Although maybe she was as well. But again, this is all. And to be fair, also, I was looking for a bullish Q4 out of crypto anyway. And it had already proved to be very strong this quarter already. But then on a Trump victory, it's jumped even faster. So it's kind of been both. It was already amounting to a bullish Q4, and we're seeing this thing explode already. So CIFR up 24, nearly 25% right now. The target for RIOT, 13. So when it hits 6.5 over here, we mentioned that 6.5 can get us back to 13 as a free trade, and that would be a Q4 target. So initially, that was kind of that idea, was to get back to 13. That's the shorter term Q4 target. Based off the key range, the longer term target is 1750. So that key range right there, right here, that's where it bounced off the 25% extension of the key range. And then you had that day. So this day we reiterated the buy because it was recovering this level, and from that buy we were looking for price to hit 1023 and then continue to 1266 to 13. So that's the current target here. And then secondly, once you get to 13, maybe there's a little messing around, but the follow through is to 1751, and that would be a key range 100% target move right there, 1751. So it depends on your duration of how long you want to hold, but 650 to 13 doubles. And then right here we reiterated the buy off the 781 for 1023, and 266 to 13. And then longer term Q1 of next year, 1751 could be in play. Sorry, I'm catching up on some of the questions here. So, Jake, usually for futures, I'm sticking on ETH right now. ETH. But like I've mentioned before, though, if you're only trading RTH and you're looking at those, that's perfectly fine as well. I would just stick on one or the other, and lately I've stuck just to the ETH. Oh, ASML. Let's look at that one real quickly here. Oof. Yeah, that's a good question. Why do we think ASML is about to take another leg down when tech is strong? And this might be for someone smarter than me that's dug into their earnings and what happened. But to me, it was that day right there and how that fundamentally broke this chart. When you get a day of that magnitude, what I mentioned that day is that's not a day you come back from very easily. It's a butt kicking, and it lingers for a while. So it's something that you don't necessarily bounce back from quickly. I mentioned that the only saving grace for this would be if it were to find a rejection the next day and bounce back to the midpoint. If it bounced back to the midpoint and you had a key range, then you could at least kind of stop the bleeding a bit. But if you didn't do that, it was going to linger and linger and linger for a bit longer until it can find an area where responsive buyers come off and look to defend into this. So it's specific to this stock because yes, tech is strong. Semiconductors here making moves. NXPI had sold off quite a bit as well and is now finding a low. But this one right now, it was that day right there that kind of just broke the chart for me. And when you have something like that, it's hard to come back from, at least quickly. And sometimes when it's that bad of a reaction on earnings, it might take until the next earnings date before it finally finds its rhythm again. Case in point, right here. Right here, it gapped down on earnings. It was bad. It dropped. And then the next earnings is when it finally picked up and recovered. So sometimes something like this can just hurt a chart for a while until they can prove at the next earnings that they've fixed whatever the hell was wrong with this earnings. So that's just my thoughts on it. Again, some folks smarter than I can dig into it and see exactly what went wrong that day. But for the most part, it breaks the chart in a big way. I mean, that is a massive day. Look at the ADR compared to anything else, and it hurt a lot of other tech stocks as well, semiconductor stocks, but they were able to kind of bounce back, some of them, afterwards. Here's NXPI. NXPI right there. You can see it had a similar kind of drop. It's recovered here on that low. This one's up nicely here, 3.6%. This was our swing candidate heading into today's market. Oh, Dwayne, I'll get to that question in 1 second. Since we're on semiconductors here, I'll look at AMD. AMD, on that big down day for ASML, it was right here. And the fact that that broke back below the 165, we mentioned that there could be a continuation back toward 130. 130 could open up a good buy and a return to 165. Obviously, we haven't gotten that far. We barely dipped the toe into the 130s. Monday, we got to 139.72 and are trying to recover right now. This could be kind of a higher low right here, kind of an uptrending channel type of pattern here at the moment. I was hopeful that we would get somewhere between 130 and 132 because this is S3 and you can see how it has responded off of S3 already this year. It's been where you get in, S3 back to value, S3 back toward value here, S3 back to value. So initially, especially on that day, we were talking, okay, can it get to here? And then you can bring it back to 165. So we hadn't quite gotten there. We're at 143 right now. It's not showing the kind of juice right now like maybe some other semiconductor stocks, at least not yet. Nvidia's up 3%, for example, right now. Of course, we've already talked about NXPI up over 3%. So it's not showing that kind of juice just yet, but I think we're in the zone here where a bounce could happen and you return back toward 165. 165 is like a magnet for this chart right now. A magnet price is where you have it attracts price. When you get too far away from it, it snaps back to it. Too far away from it, it snaps back to it. Doesn't matter where you are, it'll snap back to that price over time. And the fact that we've dropped away from it again, I think 165 is above. 165 is also the previous quarter's close. It is year-to-date VWAP. The 200-day moving average is right around there. And it's a gap fill right around there. So it's got 5 different points of confluence. So I think that's a spot that has a really good shot of being reached. Now, whether it starts that move now or does it need a little bit more downside to get there, that's the question here is are we done going down here? Do we need a little bit more? As of right now, it doesn't have the kind of juice you'd like it to have to say outright that, okay, it's time to be in. But maybe it's building that. You know, previous month's low, that's our buy zone. It's trying to work its way out of there. But I think a 165 is the upside target to strive for. Best entry would be 130 to 132s, somewhere in there. And then you watch this thing do basically this. That again, that's the goal. Right here, that's the goal off of that lower level. So those are some thoughts right there on AMD. And a little bit of a pullback right now in crude oil, now down about 0.25%, dropped off of the 72.40 zone again. So, good question here out of Dwayne regarding Bitcoin and the blockchain sector in general. What is your long-term outlook for Bitcoin and blockchain sector in general? The next 4 years, the Trump term, and beyond for another 5 to 10 years. And you mentioned here that the halving, the Bitcoin halving, will continue until about 2140. Like the year 2140? Did not know it was going to be that long out there. Like 2140, I don't think any of us are going to be around. Maybe Jake. Jake looks like he might make it. 2140. Well, maybe by then we, we've merged with AI, we've merged into cyborgs, and we'll be around. We'll see. Our consciousness is somehow preserved. But 2140, it's wild to think about a number that far out. But I think that post Bitcoin halving, we tend to see tremendous movement, especially over the last 2 or 3 times. This time around, it's been a lagging effect, but we know that it can go in a 6-month increment, a 12-month increment, and then 18 months out. So it's almost like an 18-month kind of play out of a post-Bitcoin halving world. Bitcoin halving, of course, occurred here in April, and it was mostly sideways to down since then, which has been about 6 months. But now it's up in that time span if you look 6 months out. So it did go up, and it did come with a good discount here. I think the next 6 to 12 months is probably wildly up, and easily 6 figures. We talked about the chart patterns that could take us to 125K. We had multiple larger chart patterns that took us to 125. I had one estimate at 110 and then one at 130. So 3 different ones here based off of multiple chart patterns. And then we have the key range right here, which is the shorter term target to 92. Just based off of range here recently, it's a 60,000 point range, and that easily takes you to about 130 to 125 up ahead. And that's kind of within the next year. Within the next year, that could play out. And when this thing gets to running, it can do it very quickly. If you look at just this year alone, it went from 40K to 75 very quickly. That's a 35 point impulse move real fast. 35 points from where we currently are would take us to about 110. So I mean, it has the potential here to make that move very quickly when it wants to. I think this thing, what's really wild is that very smart people, smart forecasters, have this thing at $1 million a coin by the end of the decade. You know, looking out to say 2030. I don't know. I don't know if it does or not. But what if it falls well shy of that and just gets to $250,000 per coin? That's still a tremendous move from where we currently are, and would still constitute, a quadruple from where we currently are. So I think the potential is still way up with this one. What we have seen with Bitcoin over the years, is its ability to run big and then fall back big. It's a very volatile market still. Even the first time it hit 20K, we had it. I remember the first time I gave a buy in Bitcoin was at $1,350, and at $1,350 we said, okay, you can double it at about 2,700, and then from there it might get to 10, and then from there it has a shot to hit 20. And the day it hit 20, we were in this room, well, not this Discord room, but Ecofin or whatever room we were using at the time. When it hit 20, I said, well, now that it's gone parabolic and hit 20, it could see a 30-35% correction up ahead because it's gone parabolic. And literally, in the next matter of hours, it corrected 35%. And it came true that very same day. That's how volatile it was. And from 20K, if you recall, it went back to 32.50. And from 32.50, it rallied back to 20K, which was right here, and then exploded to 60 plus, and then hit 69, and then from 69 back to 15, and 15 back to 75. Those are massive moves in both directions. So even if it does get up to 125 or 130 next year, that doesn't mean it can't drop back to 75 or lower after it does that. So it's going to be some big time swings still. So I think the volatile nature of this market probably remains. But right now it's opening a can of strength here that could really persist for a while, and then you might see some sort of massive pullback that occurs after that. So, you know, this one definitely is what goes up will come down. Just give it enough time. I mean, with gold, it's kind of quote-unquote digital gold, you know, finite supply. Even though there's only a finite supply of gold, it's never had a move. Gold, that is, has never had a move of this magnitude. This is what the biggest year probably ever for gold. It went from 2,000 to 2,800. That's an 800-point move. And if you look back, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago, or probably a little bit longer, 20 years ago, I mean, gold was probably $200 or $300. So let alone 2,000. So even with this one being finite, it didn't always rally like this. It kind of based and built and then carried on from there. So I think the future of Bitcoin is still good, especially with more adoption. I mentioned from the very beginning that I think given it ETFs, especially spot ETFs, was a huge boon for that commodity or asset, however you want to call it. Gave it a lot of street cred, and we've seen the amount of money that's gone into those ETFs right out of the gate. It was the fastest adopted ETF ever, which is saying something. There's lots of new products that come out all the time, but not all of them are adopted at that rate. So the adoption rate was huge. So I think the future is still quite bullish. I think over the next 4 years, you probably see quite a push to new all-time highs, some levels that might seem silly right now. But even after it rallies to those silly levels, we might still come back down to earth in a big way. So when you get some of those big-time moves, might want to ring the register and then pick it back up when it gets cheaper. But man, this is going to be interesting here. I think, you know, you got yourself a big rounded bottom at the highs, and that can tend to be a massive breakout mover. It could be big, and we're knocking on the door. We're on a new all-time high, but we haven't quite transitioned. It's not quite a transition through those highs. To transition through these highs would put you, you know, say at 80K or something like that, and that would really open some things up. So I know that's probably a lot of disjointed thoughts right there on Bitcoin, but I think the near-term future is really good for this one. Wow, that's incredible, Lou. Yeah, yeah. I think that was the early thoughts too on Bitcoin was tulips, tulip mania, like you say here, and it's gone through its tulip phases. You know, like we said, it's had the big ups, the big downs. It's gone through the tulip phases, but it's always come back and come back even stronger. And then again, had tulips been given spot ETFs, they might have hung around a little bit more. uh, so it's definitely done its thing. It's outlasted the mania in a big way. So huge movement here. What a day. What a day. Big time strength. Bitcoin still up over 7%. Ethereum up 10% right now. And remember, what I mentioned out of Ethereum is I think this one has the biggest potential to rally percentage-wise up ahead. It's sorely lagged Bitcoin lately, and it has just been in an accumulation zone. And the last time it had an accumulation of this magnitude, that's when I mentioned I thought ETH was going to double. And we looked at back then it was ETHE, that ETH, or ETN, whatever it was called. And not only did it double, but it tripled. And it did so in about 6 weeks. And that's what took Ethereum over 1,000 back then. So this one looks similar. It has the eye of the tiger right now. It looks the part for a rotation back to 4,000 and maybe beyond. It's well off its all-time highs. Today, nearly 10%, knocking on the door to 2,700, needs above 28 to transition and go. This one looks the part of a major mover to come. When you consider this trading range right here, and right now you have this accumulation that's developed below the bottom of that trading range. As soon as you recover the bottom, you rotate to the middle and you go across the edge to the other end. 34 and 4,000 are next. If it can just get through 2,800, and today goes a long way toward that. 9.73%, huge move up ahead for this one. So big time. I know we've covered a lot of range of topics here, a lot of different stocks, a lot of different industry groups. We're seeing tremendous movement across the board, mostly to the upside. RIOT 18%, CleanSpark 17%, Marathon 14%. You got NVIDIA up 3%, Rocket Labs are up 7%, Tesla up 13.5%. Of course, if you look at solar stocks, they're crying in their Cheerios this morning, getting crushed. And unfortunately, we didn't spend a lot of time on the intraday equity futures here because most of the range has already happened. And so the idea is sideways with an upward bias, maintain the gains, but not really extend the range too much, if at all. We're still at 139.25 points of range for the ES. Maybe it finishes on a high by the end of the day and we hit our 150 target. The NQ hit a new high here recently. It may still get a new high. This one's still lagging, but nearly 500 points of range. 1,377 points now for the YM. That is a triple. That's a triple right there. 300% of ADR. Massive move there. So very exciting days. This is what we've been talking about for a while. Could we get a confirmed result by the morning? That was best case scenario. And if it was Trump, which again, from my perspective, all indications were leaning that way, we would have some big time moves in certain stocks, and they've played out tremendously so far. Yeah, for ETH, let's see, the spot ETFs, there's a whole bunch of them. And the one, and of course, the ones you want to really pay attention to are the ones that have the most volume and the least amount of fees. And I think there's ETH itself. So ETH is a spot ETF. This is the grayscale ETF. And there's a couple of things I usually look at. Number one is, how does the chart look against the actual spot contract? And then also, what does the volume look like out of these markets? And you can look up the volume. I don't have the volume on here right here, but you can see which ETF has the most volume. ETH is one of them. There's the iShares version. This is the grayscale. The iShares version is ETHA, and iShares tends to have good volume for its ETFs as well. And you can see it looks very similar to the actual ETH chart within that range. They just started trading here recently. There's a Fidelity one, which is FETH. You can see all of them look very similar. They're all up nearly 10% as well, which is what you want to see. But I think those are the big ones. There's other ones. There's a Bitwise, a VanEck, and a Franklin. But I think those three might be the best, which is ETH. So here's a list right here, just so you have it. There's ETH. There's the what did I say? The iShares one. iShares is the ETHA. Then there's the Fidelity one, which is FETH. And then there's a few other ones here as well. And again, you might want to just check to see what the volumes are on those, because you want to trade the one with the most volume and the one that follows the chart the best. But the first three might be along the lines of what you're looking for there. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call it a morning on the mic. Thank you for hanging out for a supersized morning session here. I'll get the recording out as soon as possible. Exciting movement here across the board. Tremendous percentage moves. And we'll see if this market can carry this over into the rest of the week. Fed on deck tomorrow, which is going to be very important as well. All right, folks. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you in the room. Take care.